Who are you? What's your role? And who do you work for?
Yeah, so I'm Phil Estes. I'm a principal engineer at AWS. I've been there about 4 years. I focus on upstream open source in the container runtime space. So I was involved in Docker for a long time, and I'm a Containerd maintainer, CNCF graduated project. And so I help lead some open source activity around that area and the OCI from Amazon.
What are 3 Kubernetes emerging tools that you are keeping an eye on?
You know, the exciting piece for me about joining Amazon at the time I did 4 years ago is just seeing like a growth in their interest in open source contribution and creation of projects. So Karpenter and Crow are 2 projects that came out of Amazon. They're now used by other cloud providers, but those are both exciting, pieces of the puzzle of, being able to create and manage your clusters and handle kind of all the complexity of resource management. So those are neat. And also a fellow principal engineer created Kate's GPT, which is, we got to talk about AI. So kind of bringing the power of large language models to the ability to, what's wrong with my cluster? I'm getting these error messages. And that's now a CNCF sandbox project, I think. So those are 3 projects. They all begin with K, so that's easy. But yeah, those are 3 that I think are really neat.
Now, one of our podcast guests, Emin, pointed out that Go processes in containers aren't aware of resource limits. Have you encountered any unexpected interactions between programming languages and Kubernetes resource management?
Yeah, so, there definitely has been kind of this long-term issue with languages that have like a virtual machine, like Java has the JVM, and the JVM tries to manage its own heap memory, and people tend to start Java processes with specific limits, and then they try and put all that in a container which has its own cgroups controls around resources. So I know, just from my involvement in Docker in the early days and Containerd, people have been trying to resolve those differences of opinion, so to speak, about who's managing how much memory can be used. But, people are solving those challenges, and you can find lots of information online about how to match up, those awareness of both how much memory can I use, but also how much memory am I using. People have to basically talk to Linux to understand the real state of their memory usage, and that's how container runtimes handle it, using cgroups.
One of our guests, Eric, stated, Kubernetes is just Linux. How do you interpret this statement, and what are its implications for Kubernetes users?
Yeah, so ignoring our good friends at Microsoft, obviously there are those using Kubernetes on other platforms, but I think the basic idea is that because Linux containers are just wrapping Linux processes, and therefore everything within your container is just a Linux process that has to use the libraries and the kernel interfaces. That means that in essence, you have to know enough about Linux to understand what's happening, why your container is working or not working in certain ways. And so, I think there's definitely the expectation that because of that, there has to be an awareness of how to package your container with the right components and libraries and so forth, the same way you would do if you were deploying it on a Linux host. And so a lot of those things translate into the Kubernetes and container world.
Harsha explained that container security doesn't stop at using minimal container images. Instead, one should look at the entire supply chain, dependencies, software composition analysis, software bill of materials, etc. What's your experience in securing the supply chain?
There's tons of experts in this space, tons of vendors here around us that are focused on the secure supply chain and capabilities and tools around that. I think one of the interesting pieces that Amazon's investing in, helping the community invest in, is in the end, most of your dependencies come from some kind of package manager, whether you're Node.js or whether you're Go. And so the idea that we've always just downloaded bits from the internet and not always had a way to verify who created this, who built this, where did it come from. So a lot of the image signing, package signing, certificate management around that, and even the OpenSSF has had some two-factor auth initiatives around getting maintainers, physical keys so they can actually sign their packages properly and have verification. So I think that aspect is really important, that we get away from just downloading bits over the internet and hoping and expecting. We've seen too many security exploits around, people subverting a package or typo squatting. And so, having this model of signature verification and, across that whole stack is really, I think, another big piece of how we get to a secure supply chain.
Murcia argued that you shouldn't use a Linux distribution like Ubuntu to run your Kubernetes nodes and control plane. If your goal is to host Kubernetes, you should use policies consider minimal distributions like Talos and BottleRocket. What's your advice on operating systems in Kubernetes?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely near and dear to my heart. One of my sister teams at AWS is the BottleRocket OS team, which is a purpose-optimized Linux that's secure, that is meant, purpose-built for running containers. So I think even if you're not into BottleRocket or Talos, the concept is whatever OS you pick, it should be minimal, because all you're trying to do is run containers, and so you need some basic elements to run containers, to have whatever logging and monitoring capabilities on your node. But beyond that, you don't want a big, heavy host OS that then you're going to have to patch and update. And so these purpose-optimized OSs are definitely the right path, because you have to think about more than just the operating system, but how am I getting Kubernetes? How am I getting a container runtime? And so the fact that they're packaging and maintaining and patching these pieces for you is definitely a step in the right direction for your own, management automation around your host nodes in Kubernetes.
Kubernetes turned 10 years old last year. What should we expect in the next 10 years?
So I'm not a great prognosticator, but we know as we look around us, like, there's just all this, as the sort of core of Kubernetes matures, there's still a ton of innovation around, now we've got, how are we going to run LLMs in Kubernetes, or how are we going to handle this complicated networking stack? And so, I think we just see a broadening. So the core is getting mature. And so as new technologies show up on the horizon, we just see the Kubernetes community kind of coming around it to figure out how Kubernetes works with, serverless, how it works with AI. And so I think that's the kind of thing we'll continue to see in the next 10 years.
What's next for you, Phil?
What's next for me? So I've kind of been stuck in this container runtime world for a decade, and I love it. So I think I'm just going to keep plugging away. And the cool thing is, for me, I gave a talk Monday this week on maintaining the maintainers. Like, as our projects age, like, how are we going to bring along, I got gray hair, so I'm not going to be working forever. So I'm doing a lot of mentoring internally at Amazon, trying to do it in our communities. So I'd love to see myself not be writing so much of the code, but just helping others come up and adopt kind of these open source methodologies and get involved in projects. So that's kind of where I see myself.
How can people get in touch with you?
Luckily, I've tried to get my same name everywhere. So Estes and my first initial P. So on GitHub, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, you can find me online, and CNCF and Kubernetes Slack. Always happy to answer questions or talk to folks who are interested in open source.